D-Day, Omaha Beach, June 6, 1944, World War II. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched the biggest amphibious landing operation the world has ever seen, Operation Neptune. Around 175,000 men stormed the beaches of Normandy in France, reopening the second front in Europe against Nazi Germany. 50 miles of landing zone was divided into 5 sectors: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. In all 5 sectors, Allied troops, despite the element of surprise, sustained great casualties. However, one of them was more devastating than the others. At Omaha Beach, U.S. soldiers suffered the greatest difficulties in achieving their objective. The price they paid on this beach rightfully earned it the nickname Bloody Omaha. As an assault force for securing Omaha Beach, the U.S. Army engaged 43,000 men of the 5th Corps, organized into 2 regimental combat teams. The first was the 16th Regimental Combat Team, made from the 16th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division. This was the most experienced unit in the entire U.S. Army. The second was the 116th Regimental Combat Team, formed out of the 116th Infantry Regiment of the National Guard 29th Infantry Division. Each team was allotted a tank battalion for fire support. The 741st Tank Battalion supported the 16th RCT, and the 743rd Tank Battalion offered assistance to the 116th RCT. Both groups also included engineering teams whose task was to breach German obstacles on the beach. As an extra support, 2 Ranger battalions, the 2nd and the 5th, were added, with the task of eliminating the German artillery battery at the nearby Pointe du Hoc village and supporting the western half of the beach. In March 1944, the battle-hardened 352nd Infantry Division replaced the understrength 716th Infantry Division at the Bayou sector of the Normandy defenses. The unit consisted of Eastern Front veterans and fresh conscripts. It consisted of 3 regiments: the 914th, 915th, and 916th Grenadier Regiments, reinforced with the 726th Infantry Regiment of the 716th Infantry Division. The strength of the German defense was 7,800 soldiers. These men were organized into 13 strongpoints of Widerstandsnester, positioned in such a manner to protect the draws, the gullies that cut through the bluffs, allowing for exit off the beach. Each strongpoint was able to provide covering fire to the neighboring ones. The assault sectors at Omaha were codenamed by the U.S. Army from west to east as Charlie Dog, consisting of green, white, and red sections, Easy green and red sections, and Fox green section. The plan was for the 116th RCT to land at Dog and Easy green sectors, and for the 16th RCT on Easy red and Fox green. As it turned out, as the battle unveiled, the situation on the beach made the plan completely futile. Between 0200 and 0300 hours on the morning of June 6, 1944, the Allied fleet arrived off the coast of Normandy. As they reached the transport area, soldiers embarked transport ships on waves that were up to 6 feet tall. As they were moving towards the coast, they had the expectation that the Air Force and the Navy had already prepared the field for their arrival. The truth was completely different, as both bombers and naval artillery missed their targets because of bad weather. Not a single strongpoint was destroyed when the first assault wave appeared on Omaha Beach. Infantry couldn't even count on amphibious Sherman tanks that were supposed to provide covering fire on the beach. Out of the 29 tanks of the 741st Tank Battalion sent in the first wave, only 2 managed to reach the beach. Others sunk to the bottom of the channel as the high waves were too much for their flotation screens. Bad weather conditions also forced the landing craft to disembark troops further from the beach than planned. In some cases, the soldiers had to jump into water that was over their heads. Those who didn't drown had to make great efforts to reach the beach, fighting with big waves while wearing heavy equipment. Most of them were too exhausted to advance through the beach obstacles. To make the situation even worse, assault troops were exposed to German fire as soon as the ramps on the LCVP were dropped. Exposed to fire from deadly MG-42 machine guns, 76mm field guns, 50mm mortars and mounted 50mm guns, many soldiers were killed instantly before they even jumped into the water. This wasn't the end of it for American assault troops, as low tide and strong wind caused the landing craft to land east of their designated zones. Of the 9 companies of the first wave, only 2 landed where they were supposed to. Others were lost as they found themselves on terrain they were not familiar with. With the command structure broken, and only with a few tanks to support them, the American soldiers were forced to organize ad hoc units and to act on their own. At 0700 hours, the second wave approached the beach. They were expecting to land on clear terrain, but were welcomed in the same manner as the first wave. By 0900 hours, casualties were around 50%. The greatest fighting was around strongpoint WN62. The first breakthrough was when soldiers of Easy Company of the 16th Infantry managed to find an unprotected gap between the 2 enemy strongpoints. After they reached the bluff, they climbed it and made a lateral attack on the German bunkers. Since soldiers on the beach were lacking heavy firepower, a decision was made to send in destroyers to assist the assault. They approached to a distance of 1,000 yards from the beach, risking to run aground and commence shelling on the German strongpoints. It was because of this assistance and fire from tanks on the ground that the German defenses began to fade. By noon, many strongpoints were neutralized and most of them had run out of ammunition. Assault forces managed to make 4 major breaches, 1 on Dog White, 2 on Easy Red, and 1 on Fox Green. By the end of the day, the breaches were widened, allowing for more progress inland. As D-Day was coming to an end, assault forces on Omaha Beach were still in a vulnerable situation, as the beach was still not completely secured. Fortunately, Allied air power managed to cut off German reinforcements, and other sectors had more success, so German forces weren't able to counterattack. The 16th and the 116th Regimental Combat Teams managed to put under their control a piece of territory 10,000 yards wide and 2,000 to 3,000 yards deep. For this small area, they paid a great price. 2,000 to 5,000 had been killed, wounded, or missing in action. It was only after 2 days that the initial D-Day task was complete. The beachhead was secured, and a connection was made with Gold Sector. Of all 5 beaches, Omaha was the only one where Allied troops were put in danger of a complete defeat. It was because of the improvisation of the men on the beach that turned an initial disaster into an eventual victory. Uniform of the American GI on D-Day, June 6, 1944. From the outbreak of the Second World War, the U.S. Armed Forces started to actively prepare for what they saw as their inevitable entry into the conflict. Nevertheless, they were still relatively ill-prepared when they were finally drawn into the war on December 7, 1941, following the surprise attack by the Japanese on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. The U.S. immediately found themselves up against the combined might of the Axis powers, which consisted of Nazi Germany, Japan, and Italy. In order to fight this conflict effectively, the Americans rapidly developed a whole new generation of highly effective weapons that included the M4 Sherman tank and the B-17 Flying Fortress bomber. As a matter of urgency, the U.S. Army Infantry, commonly called GIs, which stood for Government Issue or General Issue, had their World War I era M1917 Doughboy helmet and Springfield M1903 bolt-action rifle quickly replaced with the newer M1 steel helmet and M1 Garand rifle. This new steel helmet gave much better head protection, and the M1 Garand was a semi-automatic rifle, which allowed for more rapid and accurate firing. So, when in the summer of 1944 it came time for the Allies to retake Europe from the Germans, the U.S. GIs were now well-equipped and highly motivated soldiers. Their combat uniform now started to include the U.S. Army's new olive-colored M1943 issued battle dress, which was made of special densely woven cotton sateen that was both windproof and extremely water-resistant. Soldiers were also issued the M43 double-buckle combat boots, which had better ankle protection and did away with the need for canvas ankle gaiters that had been around for the previous couple of centuries. Due to supply problems with the new uniform, however, most units fighting in France didn't get theirs until the autumn of 1944, well after the Normandy landings. This, and the fact that the military wanted to use up all of the existing uniform supplies first, meant that most U.S. infantry divisions assaulted the beaches designated Utah and Omaha in Normandy, wearing the old M41 combat jackets and rough-out boots with canvas gaiters. Though the majority of GIs carried the M1 Garand rifle, some were given the cumbersome M1918 BAR to be used as a squad's light machine gun. The ammo was normally carried in the 10 ammunition pouches on the standard issue belts. The Garand used 30-06 caliber cartridges in 8-round en-bloc clips loaded into an internal magazine. When the last round was fired, the spent clips would be ejected and make an audible pinging sound. Each pouch could carry one clip, but more ammunition could be carried about his person or in the semi-waterproof backpack. Also found in the average soldier's backpack was his canteen cup, and mess kit, all of which were made of lightweight aluminum. These were packed alongside his food in the form of emergency D-ration high-energy chocolate bars for eating on the go, and the more nutritious K field ration packs, which included gum, cigarettes, matches, and toilet paper. In addition to all of this, there was a useful barbed wire cutter and the all-important first aid kit, which contained a one-size-fits-all wounds Carlisle bandage that was impregnated with sulfa. On the outside were 3 pouches that each housed 2 hand grenades. Hanging from the back was an entrenching tool, which could also be used to great effect as a hand-to-hand combat weapon. Though the 10-inch bayonet that fixed on the end of the standard rifle also fulfilled this purpose, acting as a deadly combat knife in a pinch. Additionally, several further items were added to the GI's kit, especially for D-Day. First was an extremely handy set of books, one on French culture and the other a French-English dictionary. These were particularly useful as the average American soldier had never been out of his home state before, let alone to a distant country like France. A life preserver and a waterproof rifle bag were also supplied in case you were unlucky enough to have your landing craft sunk by enemy fire and end up in the freezing cold water of the English Channel. Though obviously these special issue countermeasures were quickly discarded once ashore on the beaches of Normandy. While this may seem like a lot of equipment and supplies for just one man to carry, during the Normandy landings in particular, it was more important than ever that the average U.S. soldier was as self-sufficient as possible. This was due to the uncertainty as to when forward supply bases could be established efficiently. Once the beachhead was established and the Allied troops pushed further inland, they could leave behind these heavy backpacks and were able to more accurately tailor what they would carry for individual missions, raids, or patrols. One piece of kit generally left behind was the standard issue E637 Army Assault Gas Mask, later renamed the M5117 Combat Service Mask. It was anticipated that there was a 1 in 3 chance that the Germans would use gas to protect the beachheads, but they never did. Incidentally, the waterproof carrier acted as an additional flotation aid to complement the life preserver because of it being strapped to the soldier's chest. Today, it's estimated that the average U.S. soldier costs anywhere between $28,000 and $60,000 to equip, depending on their role and the theater that they're being deployed to. This cost is naturally ever increasing as modern equipment and high-tech innovations are applied to a soldier's loadout. Heinrich Severloh, the Beast of Omaha. Stories from D-Day. Born in Metzingen, Germany, to a farming family in 1923, Heinrich Severloh was conscripted into the Wehrmacht at the age of 19 in 1942. According to his memoir, he was first stationed in Hanover with the 19th Light Artillery Division before being transferred to France in August 1942. There, he served with the 321st Artillery Regiment as a dispatch rider before being sent to the Eastern Front in December. In December 1942, Severloh was reprimanded for making dissenting remarks and punished so severely that he spent 6 months in the hospital. He was sent home to his family farm before being recalled to military service once more. Severloh was sent to Brunswick, Germany in October 1943 for non-commissioned officer training, but was stationed with the 352nd Infantry Division after less than a month there. Severloh then went to Normandy, where he was stationed with 29 others in a German stronghold at Omaha Beach as Allied forces approached on June 6, 1944. He was in Widerstandsnest 62, or Resistance Nest 62, under the command of Lieutenant Bernhard Frerking, which was armed with artillery guns, rocket launchers, and machine guns. 0500 hours. The fog had faded away, and Severlo could see the assembled mass of enemy ships on the horizon. Then he heard a drone of bombers. Everyone in WN-62 jumped into a dugout or bunker as bombs rained down. However, they had missed their target, instead hitting the areas behind the strongpoints. Then, after a short pause, the ships now opened fire, bombarding the shore. According to Severlo, thick, bright gray chalk dust filled the air. Smoke and the dirt flying around blackened the sky, interspersed with flashing bolts of lightning. It seemed as if the whole world would disappear in the roaring, howling, and crashing inferno of exploding shells. Some of the men in WN-62 were only slightly wounded, but none were killed. As Severlo looked up and returned to his MG-42 machine gun, he saw 48 landing craft getting closer to the beach. According to Severlo, he and his fellow German troops received orders from Lieutenant Bernhard Frerking to fire when the enemy was knee-deep in the water and still unable to run quickly. As the American soldiers waded in the water, the order was given, and all at once, the mortars, machine guns, and field guns opened fire, causing panic among the first enemy wave. Many sought cover behind the tank obstacles. Severlo opened fire with the MG-42 machine gun at the American troops. He was fed ammunition by a soldier he didn't know. He recalled one of his shots as it struck an American soldier in the head. First, the steel helmet fell off. Then his chin fell on his chest. Severlo watched as the water sprayed up where the machine gun bursts had landed, and when the small fountains came closer to the GIs, they threw themselves down. Very soon, the first bodies were drifting in the waves of the rising tide. He aimed slightly beyond the dark shapes that were the corpses of GIs as more men drifted in the tide behind them. In a short time, the Americans down there had been taken down. Severlo claimed he fired his machine gun for 9 straight hours, firing around 12,000 rounds. He only took breaks to reload or to let the weapon cool down. While reloading, 1 or 2 Americans would take the opportunity to move closer, only to be shot down by one of the other gunners in the bunker. As his MG-42 cooled down, Severlo fired a rifle instead. After his regular ammo ran out, he used rounds intended for anti-aircraft fire where every 5th round was a tracer round. This led to his detection by the USS Frankfurt, and he was fired upon. He took cover just in time before the shells could hit him, although shrapnel had hit his face. His gun was damaged and finally rendered useless. Its hot barrel had even caused a small grass fire. The shells were now causing havoc on their position, and some US soldiers were getting closer to his position. It was time to get out of there. Frerking shook Severlo's hand and ordered him to retreat. Severlo and his fellow Germans retreated from the bunker, and they all took cover from the American gunfire. Only himself and another German soldier, Kurt Wernicke, made it. When Wernicke got to Severlo, he told him Frerking had been shot in the head. Together, they reached the nearby village of Cauville-sur-Mer, where their battalion HQ was, and Severlo received medical care. The Germans, including Severlo, surrendered to American troops on June 7, 1944. Severlo was sent to Boston, Massachusetts as a prisoner of war before being sent to England in 1946, where he worked as a forced laborer until March 1947. Severlo then returned to Germany to his family's farm. In 1960, Severlo contacted American veteran chaplain David Silva, who had been shot 3 times at Omaha Beach. The men met several times, and their story is featured in a documentary by Alexander Chogala about their unusual friendship, Path of Forgiveness, a long way back to Omaha Beach. Severlo's memoir, WN-62, a German soldier's memories of the defense of Omaha Beach, Normandy, June 6, 1944, was published in the year 2000. Severlo claimed that he took out more than 1,000 men, most likely more than 2,000. There is no way to substantiate Severlo's assertions, and many historians doubt their validity. The total U.S. casualties at Omaha Beach were between 1,900 and 3,000. Heinrich Severlo became known as the Beast of Omaha, but this was only given to him by the post-war media. Severlo was actually deeply haunted by his actions, but noted that he had a duty to Lieutenant Frerking. For Cerullo's claims to be accurate, he would have been responsible for most of the casualties at Omaha Beach. Historians don't doubt his significance in the event, nor do they question the effectiveness of the machine guns on Omaha Beach, but no exact totals for one lone gunner can be known. Cerullo would die in Lochendorf, Germany in 2006 at the age of 82.
U.S. paratrooper, World War II, the Western Front. America was late to develop airborne infantry, but once it did, development was rapid. The first U.S. airborne unit was tested in 1940. In 1942, the 82nd Infantry became the first airborne division, followed by the Screaming Eagles 101st Airborne, the 11th, 13th, and 17th. Paratroopers were volunteers who were motivated by the chance of becoming an elite unit and receiving extra pay. If they made it past selection, the recruit would go through a vigorous training process at jump school. Physical training exercise such as forced marches, running, and obstacle courses would test their endurance and make or break the recruit. The next stage would focus on skills-based training. Recruits were taught how to pack a parachute, how to guide a parachute, and how to land properly. They would leap from 250-foot or 76-meter high jump towers to practice parachute jumps. But the main test would come when the recruit would jump out of an aircraft for the first time. Any hesitations would prove if they were airborne material or not. Paratroopers were dressed in special clothing and equipment, which would help them in their dangerous missions. They were encumbered with a lot of equipment to carry, necessary for long drawn-out combat without support behind enemy lines. The uniform consisted of jump boots, an M1942 jump jacket and trousers, sometimes with knee pads, an M2 helmet, and gloves. Some of the equipment consisted of a parachute, an emergency reserve parachute, life preserver vest, webbing, musette bag and rope, a canteen, an entrenching tool, rations, a compass, a cricket noisemaker, camouflage paint, and an M2 switchblade to cut themselves out of parachutes. Their weapons included an M3 fighting knife attached to the lower leg, the M1 Garand, the M1A1 carbine with a folding stock variation ideal for paratroopers, the M1A1 Thompson submachine gun, the M1918A2 Browning automatic rifle, the M3 grease gun, the M1911A1 Colt pistol, the M9 bazooka, and Mark II grenades. U.S. airborne troops first fought in North Africa, then the invasion of Sicily in 1943. Most would be sent to England in preparation for D-Day in June 1944. In preparation, some of the paratroopers would camouflage their faces and shave their heads into mohawks. The 82nd and 101st would do a nighttime drop into Normandy, France, with the objective of holding areas inland from the invasion beaches. The C-47 aircraft holding the paratroopers would come under heavy flak and fog, and in the chaos, the men would jump out in a wide scattered radius, separating from each other on the ground in pitch-black darkness. To identify themselves from the enemy, the paratroopers used their clickers, followed by a code word. The unlucky ones either lost their equipment, drowned, or became stuck in trees or utility poles while being shot at by the enemy before they could even undo their parachutes. The paratroopers were successfully able to prevent German counterattacks on the D-Day landings, sabotage gun emplacements, and create great confusion behind enemy lines. The 82nd and 101st would then take part in further airborne operations. Next was Operation Market Garden in the Netherlands. As part of the 1st Allied Airborne Army, they fought off continuous German counterattacks. The British had failed to capture Arnhem Bridge, and as a result, the Germans were able to move defenders to the Nijmegen Bridge. The 82nd Airborne Division went on a suicide mission, crossing the Vaal River in unsuitable boats while being fired upon, but successfully captured the north end of the Nijmegen Road Bridge at the cost of very high casualties. The 82nd and 101st would then take part in the Battle of the Bulge from 1944 to 45, fighting off heavily armed German counteroffensives against the odds in the bitter winter. Following this, U.S. paratroopers would participate in the Allied invasion into Germany in 1945.